The Xylosian probe, designated Unit 734, hovered silently, a discreet shimmer against the night sky. Below, the human settlement thrummed with a chaotic energy that defied all rational classification. The air itself vibrated, thick with unfamiliar scents, fermented grain, cooked animal flesh, and a sharp, acrid tang that Unit 734's sensors identified as the byproduct of rapid oxidation. Fire. So much fire. Thousands of human bipeds, packed shoulder to shoulder, roared as a massive wooden structure, meticulously crafted to resemble an ancient dwelling, finally succumbed to the flames. Sparks showered the cheering multitude. Unit 734's optics zoomed, analyzing the facial expressions. No distress, only exhilaration. Ecstasy. The data streamed back to the fleet. Cum species displays communal gratification at controlled demolition. Cultic behavior confirmed. The ground shuddered with synchronized stomping. A group of heavily adorned humans, wielding blunt metal implements, began a mock battle near the dying embers. Their movements were exaggerated, violent, yet clearly choreographed. One human, a large male with a braided beard, roared something incomprehensible, then took a dramatic swing, narrowly missing another's head. The crowd howled with delight. This wasn't combat training. It was entertainment. Dangerous, senseless entertainment. They're reliving ancient feuds, chirped the Xylosian cultural analyst, Dr. Velo, her voice crisp over the comms. Their analysts, traditions, often involve ritualized aggression, ambassador. They call this a grudge match. Observe the alcohol consumption. Highly intoxicating. It lowers inhibitions, amplifies their already volatile emotional responses. Unit 734 registered the scent of the fermented liquid, dubbed mead in human records, emanating from countless vessels. Humans swigged from them, their faces flushed, their laughter booming over the crackle of burning timber. One particularly boisterous human, balancing precariously on a wooden barrel, lifted his mug to the sky. To the harvest! And to Old Man Thistle, may his ancestors forgive him for the stolen pig. The crowd roared its approval, a wave of guttural sound. The ambassador's reply was a low growl. They cheer for destruction, Dr. Velo. They consume psychoactive compounds and celebrate historical grievances with mock violence. This isn't culture. It's a dangerous pathology. A species obsessed with self-destruction, yet somehow thriving. Below, the mock battle intensified. A human in a leather vest slipped on a patch of wet earth, tumbling head over heels. For a split second, Unit 734 detected a surge of alarm in the surrounding crowd. Then, the human sprang back up, unhurt, a wide, challenging grin on his face. He spat on the ground, flexed, and rejoined the fray to thunderous applause. The fleeting fear dissolved, replaced by a surge of defiant joy. It wasn't just about destruction. It was about the edge. The taste of near disaster quickly averted. It was about the sheer, unadulterated human capacity to face the precipice, laugh, and pull back stronger. To find a wild, untamed beauty in the dance between chaos and control. The ground still pulsed from the previous spectacle, the air thick with the memory of burning wood and fermented grain. But the humans weren't done. Not by a long shot. Unit 734, still hovering undetected, calibrated its sensors for the next wave of chaotic energy. What it observed next transcended all logical xenocultural models. A massive, ornate wooden wheel, easily 50 meters across, stood upright on a hill overlooking the main gathering. It was laced with complex patterns of what human records identified as fireworks, volatile chemical compounds, designed to explode and produce brilliant light. But this wasn't some distant aerial display. This was close. The crowd had surged forward, a deafening wave of bodies, until they were almost within spitting distance of the colossal silent destructor. Then, a lone human figure, cloaked in dark fabric, emerged from the base of the wheel. They carried a blazing torch, held high. A hush fell over the crowd, an eerie quiet that was almost more unsettling than their usual roars. Unit 734 registered a spike in human adrenaline levels across the entire assembly. A palpable tension, thick and raw, hung in the air. This wasn't anticipation of beauty, it was anticipation of asterisk impact. The figure raised the torch. A single guttural shout tore through the silence. "To the edge!" Thousands of human voices answered in unison, a booming chorus that rattled the probe. To the edge. With a deliberate, unhurried motion, the human touched the torch to the base of the wheel. The first fuse hissed. A small shower of sparks erupted, quickly followed by a series of sharp, concussive clues that rippled through the mass of bodies. The crowd roared, not with panic, but with pure, unadulterated triumph. "They toast danger," Dr. Velo's voice crackled, laced with barely contained alarm. "Ambassador, they are intentionally placing themselves in proximity to explosive forces, and celebrating it." The wheel began to ignite, not all at once, but in a frantic, escalating dance. Explosions blossomed across its face, sending brilliant streaks of light and showers of burning debris arcing directly towards the crowd. Unit 734's optical sensors picked up fragments of flaming wood sailing over human heads, sparks showering down like liquid fire. Yet, they did not scatter. They pressed closer. A particularly loud blast made the ground vibrate, and a larger piece of flaming debris arced directly over a cluster of humans, impacting just meters behind them. The aliens expected screams of terror, a stampede. Instead, the humans simply roared louder, their faces lit by the inferno, eyes wide with awe, and a wild, defiant joy. One human, a stocky female, threw her head back and let out a piercing whoop, raising a steaming mug in a gesture of salute to the chaos. "This is not logical," the ambassador finally rumbled, his voice strained. "They court disaster. They invite the blade to kiss their throats, then toast its sharpness." Below, the wheel was a roaring, spitting vortex of fire and light. It pulsed with violent beauty, a controlled explosion that still flirted with catastrophe. And the humans, bathed in its dangerous glow, stood their ground. They had stared the inferno in the eye, dared it to consume them, and found a strange, exhilarating communion in the defiance. They raised their mugs, not just to the spectacle, but to the very act of standing on that knife's edge and refusing to fall. The roar was a physical thing, rattling Unit 734's cloaked hull. Not the drunken clamor of a burning feast this time, but a focused primal bellow that surged from tens of thousands of human throats. Below, a dirt track, scarred by previous passes, stretched out under blinding artificial lights. The scent wasn't mead, but ozone, scorched rubber, and high-octane fuel. Humanity, the ambassador thought, had found a new way to flirt with annihilation. Inside the cramped cockpit of the Iron Serpent, Kalen breathed. Each breath was slow, measured, tasting of recycled air and the metallic tang of concentration. His fingers, calloused and precise, danced over the controls, a silent prayer to the mechanics. The heavy durasteel of his helmet felt like a second skin, isolating him from the deafening frenzy just outside. Here, in this confined space, there was only the hum of the engine, the thrum of his own pulse, and the razor-thin line between glory and wreckage. "They're preparing for another gravity sprint," Dr. Velo transmitted, her voice laced with growing incredulity. "The objective is to maintain maximum velocity through a series of artificially induced zero-gravity inversions, then navigate a high-impact slalom course." All while strapped into that projectile, Kalen felt the surge of power as the engine roared to life beneath him, a monstrous beast straining against its tethers. The vibrations hammered up through the chassis, through his seat, into his very bones. His vision narrowed to the holographic display, the countdown ticking relentlessly. 5, 4. The crowd's roar peaked, a tidal wave of sound even his helmet couldn't entirely block. 3, 2. He tasted the fear, sharp and invigorating, a primal spark. 1. The magnetic clamps released with a violent shudder. The serpent rocketed forward, instantly pressed against his seat by overwhelming G-forces. The world outside became a blur of flashing lights and screaming fans. His mind, however, was icy calm, reacting to every twitch of the wheel, every subtle shift in terrain. The first inversion came hard, a sickening lurch as the vehicle was briefly flung skyward, then slammed back down, impacting with a bone-jarring thud. Air rushed out of Kalen's lungs, but his grip never faltered. "Remarkable," the ambassador muttered, observing the precision. "Even for such a reckless species." The slalom course appeared, a nightmare of narrow gates and unforgiving turns. Kalen threw the serpent left, then right, the tires screaming in protest, kicking up plumes of dirt and debris. The G-forces tore at him, threatening to rip his arms from their sockets, to force the breath from his chest. Sweat stung his eyes, blurring the edges of his vision. But he pushed. He always pushed. There was a raw, undeniable joy in feeling the machine bend to his will, in cheating disaster by mere centimeters. Each near collision was a tiny victory, a testament to the unyielding human spirit. He saw the final jump, a ramp, steep and unforgiving, leading to a gap that seemed impossibly wide. He hit it at full throttle, a prayer on his lips. The serpent launched, briefly hanging suspended against the alien observers' astounded gazes. For a moment, Kalen was weightless, silent, suspended between earth and sky, between life and oblivion. Then, the brutal impact. He grunted, fought the steering wheel, wrestled the vehicle back under control as it skidded wildly across the finish line. The crowd exploded. A single, unified, deafening roar of triumph. Kalen slumped against the restraints, gasping, heart-hammering. He had made it. They always made it, somehow. Because humans sometimes just needed to prove to themselves that they could walk the line, flirt with the edge, and come back to tell the tale. The wind bit, a cold, eager fang against Jax's exposed skin, even through the thin flight suit. Below, the canyon yawned, a dark, hungry maw illuminated by 1,000 flickering torches. Across the chasm, impossibly far, a small landing platform pulsed with target lights, framed by a shimmering ring of controlled explosives. The crowd was a restless ocean of faces, their collective breath held, a low hum of anticipation that vibrated in Jax's bones. He adjusted the last strap of the skeletal glider, feeling the familiar weight of the carbon fiber frame on his back. Unit 734, cloaked above, registered the immense drop. Ambassador, the human Jax, is preparing for a glory leap. They utilize a spring-tension catapult to launch themselves across an estimated 800-meter span. The landing zone is highly constricted, and the ring of fire will activate on impact. Dr. Velo's vocalizer contained a faint tremor of disbelief. All for honor, and to impress a specific individual, a female designated Elara. Jax met Elara's gaze across the chasm. Her eyes, even from this distance, held a mixture of fear and fierce pride. He offered a quick, reckless grin. This wasn't about logic. It was about the surge of blood, the scream of the wind, the primal need to prove something, anything, to her, and to himself. The sheer, terrifying exhilaration of defying gravity, if only for a few heart-stopping seconds. Initiating launch sequence, a voice boomed from the ground crew. The catapult groaned, winding tighter. Jax leaned forward, gripping the glider's control bar, muscles coiled. His heart hammered, a drumbeat against his ribs. 5. 4. He cleared his mind, focusing on the wind's whisper, the subtle shift in air currents. 3. 2. He tasted the metallic tang of adrenaline, a sharp, clean taste. 1. With a violent tur-to-two, the catapult launched him into the night. The world blurred. A sickening lurch. Then the terrifying rush of freefall. The air roared past his ears, trying to rip the glider from his grasp. Jax fought it, a battle against an invisible current, his entire body screaming with the effort. The canyon floor rushed up, then receded as the glider caught the updraft, a delicate, perilous dance. He pulled hard on the left control, feeling the strain in his shoulders as the platform across the chasm grew larger, still too small. "Deviation registered!" Dr. Velo cried. A crosswind surge. Impact trajectory is now off by 7.3 degrees. A gasp rippled through the crowd below. Jax saw it too. He was drifting too far right, heading for the jagged canyon wall instead of the platform. His mind snapped. Not panic, but an instinct born of countless hours of practice, of near misses. He tucked his knees, twisted his torso, pulling the glider into a desperate, aggressive maneuver. The wind shrieked, threatening to tear him apart, but he pushed through it, leveraging every muscle, every ounce of his stubborn human will. He was not going to fail. Not now. Not with her watching. The platform loomed. He yanked the glider down, fighting against the final push of the wind. With a bone-jarring impact, his feet slammed onto the landing zone. The ring of explosives detonated in a glorious, concussive kaboom, showering him in brilliant, harmless light. The crowd erupted, a single, unified, deafening roar of triumph and relief. Jack stumbled, caught his balance, and threw his arms wide, a wild, disbelieving laugh tearing from his throat. He looked across the chasm. Ilara was on her feet, clapping, a radiant smile on her face. He had done it. For the glory, for the thrill, for a lady's gaze. Because sometimes, a human just needed to make the impossible happen, if only to feel utterly, undeniably alive. The air hung heavy, thick with the cloying sweetness of burning resins. Not the acrid tang of explosions, nor the ozone of speed. This was different. This was incense, rising in plumes from ornate censers carried by robed figures, mingling with the suffocating heat of the desert sun. Below, a winding procession snaked through ancient sun-baked streets, observed by a hushed, reverent crowd. Unit 734's atmospheric processors struggled to categorize the pervasive scent. Ambassador, new data. Human festival designated, Day of Atonement. The primary activity appears to involve self-flagellation. Dr. Velo's voice was a whisper of bewildered revulsion. At the heart of the procession, walking barefoot on the scorching cobblestones, was a human named Mara. Her back was bare, crisscrossed with angry red welts, each one a testament to the lash she wielded herself. The whip was simple, braided leather, and she brought it down with a rhythmic, measured swing, a soft thwip-thwack that seemed to cut through the heavy silence. Her face, beaded with sweat and dust, was a mask of intense concentration, not agony. Her eyes were closed, her lips moving in a silent chant. The crowd didn't cheer here. They murmured. A collective intake of breath with each strike. Some wept, others knelt, heads bowed as Mara passed. The ground itself seemed to radiate the accumulated energy of generations, of rituals repeated under the same unforgiving sun. Unit 734's sensors detected pain, undoubtedly, but also a profound sense of purpose, a calm, almost meditative state beneath the searing sting. They inflict pain upon themselves willingly, the ambassador observed, his metallic voice devoid of emotion, yet registering the anomaly. They embrace suffering. For what purpose, Dr. Velo? Their historical archives speak of purification, penance, offering. A way to connect with ancient deities. 2. Cleanse the spirit. Dr. Velo replied, her processing units clearly struggling. They believe that through this shared ordeal, they draw closer to something profound. That the physical pain allows for spiritual clarity. Mara felt the familiar burn bloom across her skin, a sharp, cleansing fire. It was not pleasant, no, but neither was it senseless. Each strike was a breath, a prayer, a letting go. The scent of the incense filled her lungs, grounding her, pulling her deeper into the rhythm of the march. Her muscles ached, her feet throbbed, but her spirit felt strangely light, unbound. It was a test, yes, but also a balm, a way to shed the weight of the year, to emerge renewed. A sudden gasp rippled through the onlookers. Mara's bare foot had snagged on a loose stone. She stumbled, her body swaying precariously. For a terrifying second, the balance was lost. The lash fell from her hand. The crowd held its breath, the silence deafening. Then, with a grunt, Mara regained her footing, swaying but unbroken. A young boy from the crowd, his eyes wide, rushed forward and pressed the fallen lash back into her hand. She gave him a fleeting, grateful nod, her gaze unwavering. She picked up the rhythm, the thwip-thwack resuming its solemn cadence. The pain was sharper now, a stark reminder of her momentary lapse, but so too was the resolve. It was not about flawless execution, but about enduring the stumble, picking up the pieces, and continuing the journey. Humanity, the ambassador thought, watched a cult practice. But Mara, walking under the blazing sun, felt the ancient, stubborn heart of tradition beat within her, proving that resilience wasn't just about fighting external threats, but about conquering the battles within, one painful, purposeful step at a time. The air in the grand town square shimmered, not just from the oppressive desert heat, but from the dense, fragrant smoke of countless censers. The sweet, cloying incense now mingled with a sharp, earthy smell, something primal and unsettling. The winding procession from earlier had finally converged here. The vast crowd hushed, eyes fixed on a raised stone platform at the square's center. On that platform, an expanse of glowing embers pulsed with malevolent light, a bed of fire, carefully arranged, radiating heat that made the very air vibrate. Unit 734's thermal sensors screamed, "Ambassador, the temperature of those embers exceeds 200 degrees Kelvin. A human cannot possibly traverse that surface without catastrophic cellular damage." Dr. Velo's voice was strained, a note of genuine horror creeping in. Then, a figure emerged, not Mara from the procession, but an ancient man, his face a roadmap of wrinkles, his eyes clear and impossibly old. His bare feet were visible, calloused and firm. He wore only a simple linen tunic, his body lean, almost skeletal. He didn't carry a lash. He carried something far more terrifying, a profound stillness. He bowed to the four directions, then turned to face the glowing inferno. A low, resonant chant rose from the crowd, a guttural hum that permeated the ground and vibrated in Unit 734's chassis. It was a sound of encouragement, of shared ordeal, a collective will urging the man forward. He took a deep, shuddering breath, the incense filling his lungs, his gaze unwavering from the incandescent coals. This wasn't just penance, it was a defiant declaration. "He's preparing for the passage of flame," Dr. Velo explained, her voice tight. "A symbolic purification. They believe it steals the spirit." With a single, deliberate step, the old man placed his right foot onto the blazing coals. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Unit 734 registered an immediate spike in localized heat around his foot, cellular stress indicators rising. Yet the old man did not scream. He did not flinch. His face contorted, yes, a flicker of raw, searing pain, but his jaw remained clenched, his eyes still fixed, distant. He moved his left foot, then his right again, a slow, methodical shuffle across the scorching path. The smell hit Unit 734's biofilters, a faint, almost imperceptible scent of singed organic matter. The crowd responded with intensified chanting, a rhythmic, human ID asterisk that beat like a drum. The raw emotion was overwhelming, awe, shared pain, fierce pride. They were not just watching, they were walking with him, every agonizing step. The ambassador's voice, usually so calm, held a tremor. They embrace the agony. They find meaning in the burn. They transmute suffering into resolve. The old man reached the end of the fiery path. His feet, blistered and scorched, stepped onto the cool stone on the other side. He stumbled, falling to one knee, hands braced against the ground. For a moment he remained there, chest heaving, steam rising faintly from his feet. Then, slowly, painfully, he pushed himself upright. He turned, his gaze sweeping over the silent, reverent crowd. A single, triumphant tear tracked a path through the dust on his cheek. The square erupted, not in raucous celebration, but in a profound unified roar of respect. They had witnessed not a destruction, but a forging. A reminder that sometimes the sharpest edges of pain aren't meant to break you, but to prove just how utterly unbreakable you truly are. The biting wind was a physical entity, clawing at Kale's exposed skin, searing his lungs with every desperate gulp of freezing air. Snow, fine as dust, whipped around him, blurring the already treacherous landscape. Below, the glacial lake was a vast obsidian mirror, its surface groaning with the stress of the deep cold. Thousands of humans, bundled in thick furs and insulated gear, lined the shore, their breath pluming white in the frigid air. Unit 734, cloaked above, registered the ambient temperature, a lethal -35 degrees Celsius, with wind chill plummeting it further. Ambassador, this is a polar plunge event, Dr. Velo reported, her synthesized voice barely concealing utter bafflement. A celebration of winter endurance. Participants voluntarily immerse themselves in sub-zero water, then race across the frozen lake. Their primary physiological response should be hypothermia and cardiac arrest. Cale shivered uncontrollably, but it wasn't just the cold. It was the anticipation. The fear was a live thing in his gut, but beneath it, a strange, electric thrill. He stood at the edge of the ice hole, steam rising from the impossibly dark water. His body screamed at him to retreat, to seek the warmth of the roaring bonfires visible in the distance. But a silent, defiant voice urged him forward. This wasn't about logic. It was about proving something. To the cold, to the ancestors, to himself. "Ready!" a voice boomed from the shore. A collective cheer, raw and guttural, erupted from the crowd. Cale took one last, ragged breath, the freezing air burning his throat. Then he plunged. The shock was immediate, total. It felt like 1,000 needles piercing his skin, his muscles seizing, his breath stolen. His world narrowed to the crushing cold, the painful gasp for air. He surfaced, gasping, ice shards clinging to his hair, his skin turning a ghastly blue. The crowd roared, a sound of shared agony and fierce encouragement. He swam, or rather thrashed, towards the opposite bank, his limbs heavy, sluggish, each stroke a monumental effort. The water was a vice, trying to squeeze the life from him. "Their core body temperature is dropping precipitously," Dr. Velo exclaimed. "They risk irreversible damage." Cale's mind was a fog of pain and grim determination. Just one more stroke. Just one more. The warmth of the distant hearths, the image of hot spiced cider, became a burning beacon in his mind. He scrambled onto the ice, hands numb, muscles screaming, crawling on all fours for a few meters before forcing himself upright. He stumbled, half running, half staggering across the uneven ice, towards the finish line marked by 2 flaming torches. He crossed it, collapsing into the waiting arms of 2 bundled volunteers who immediately wrapped him in thermal blankets. He shivered violently, teeth chattering so hard his jaw ached, but a wild, triumphant laugh tore from his throat. The crowd surged forward, patting his back, handing him a steaming mug. The heat, the sweet spices flooded his senses, chasing away the cold, leaving behind an exhilarating rush. He looked back at the lake, at the other figures still battling the frigid water. It wasn't just about surviving the cold. It was about facing down the impossible, sharing that raw, terrifying moment, and then finding defiant joy in the warmth of shared survival. Because humans, sometimes, just needed to feel the bite of the wind, to truly appreciate the warmth of the hearth, and each other. The gnawing emptiness in Anya's stomach was a constant, unwelcome companion, a dull ache that intensified with every labored step. The wind, though not as violently cold as the plunge of yesterday, still stripped heat from her body, making the scant warmth from her fur-lined cloak feel almost negligible. Around her, a dozen other figures, gaunt and determined, pressed onward, their breath pluming white against the stark snow-dusted peaks. This wasn't a race of speed. It was a test of will. Unit 734's sensors monitored the group's physiological responses. "Ambassador, these humans have voluntarily abstained from caloric intake for over 3 full Earth cycles," Dr. Velo reported, her voice tinged with a new, deep bewilderment. "They are undergoing extreme physical exertion, navigating treacherous mountain terrain, with no provisions for sustenance. Their energy reserves are critically depleted. This is a deliberate communal march towards starvation." Anya felt the dizziness, a fleeting head rush that threatened to buckle her knees. Her legs burned, her muscles screaming for fuel, for rest, but she tightened her jaw, focusing on the rhythmic crunch of her boots on the hard snow, the steady, determined breathing of the human walking just ahead of her. This was the pilgrimage of the lean season, a tradition passed down through generations, a defiant remembrance of harder times. It wasn't about seeking pain, not truly. It was about finding strength in its absence, and enduring the hunger until it became a phantom, a whisper rather than a roar. They are hallucinating, the ambassador stated, observing the subtle shifts in human ocular patterns. Their brain chemistry is reacting to severe nutrient deprivation. Yet, they continue. What drives this self-imposed suffering? What drove it? Anya looked up, squinting against the low, weak sun. Ahead, barely visible, was the summit of the starved, a jagged peak where, tradition said, the spirit was clearest. Her mouth was dry, her lips cracked, but a fierce, almost joyful resolve burned within her. She wasn't starving, she was shedding the trivial, the soft, the unnecessary, until only the raw, resilient core of herself remained. Each pang of hunger was a reminder of what her ancestors had faced, what they had overcome. One of the younger pilgrims, a broad-shouldered man named Torvin, stumbled, his face pale, eyes unfocused. Anya reached out, her hand, surprisingly steady, gripping his arm. "Keep moving, Torvin." Almost there. Her voice was a rasp, but the conviction in it was clear. Torvin nodded, forcing a weak smile, and pushed himself forward. They weren't alone in this. The shared ordeal forged a bond far stronger than any feast. The final ascent was brutal. Every step was a battle against screaming muscles and the insidious whisper of surrender. The air thinned, making each breath a struggle. Anya pulled herself up the last icy slope, her vision blurring, until she finally, gloriously, reached the summit. Below, the others followed, each one a testament to stubborn, unbreakable will. When the last pilgrim dragged himself over the crest, a weak, ragged cheer erupted. They didn't have food, didn't have warmth, but they had each other. They stood on that windswept peak leaning on one another, their faces etched with exhaustion, but their eyes shining with a profound, shared triumph. They had danced with starvation, felt its cold breath, and emerged not broken, but refined. Because sometimes, humanity needed to strip itself bare, to stand at the very edge of depletion, just to remember the profound, unyielding power of pure, unadulterated will. The city throbbed not with the controlled pulse of industry or the solemn beat of ritual, but with a riot of color, sound, and movement that assaulted Unit 734's sensors. Garish banners fluttered from every building, explosions of confetti rained from the sky, and a cacophony of brass instruments, drums, and human shouts formed a dizzying, joyous roar. But what truly baffled the alien observers were the faces. Every single human wore a mask, grotesque, beautiful, terrifying, or absurd. "Ambassador, this is Carnival," Dr. Velo transmitted, her voice vibrating with a new level of bewilderment. "A festival of inversion. Norms are suspended. Social hierarchy is temporarily dissolved. Individuals adopt new personas behind their masks." Below, a group of humans, dressed as oversized, laughing skulls, careened through the crowd, showering onlookers with glittering dust. A human in a vibrant feathered mask, resembling some ancient bird deity, locked eyes with another, whose visage was a snarling beast. For a moment, Unit 734 registered a spike in their adrenaline, a tense standoff. Then, the feathered figure let out a piercing, gleeful shriek, lunged and playfully slapped the beast-masked human's shoulder before dissolving into the throng with a cackle. The beast simply roared with laughter in return. This wasn't aggression. It was a bizarre, shared dance of anonymity. "They intentionally create social disarray," the ambassador rumbled, his sensors picking up the constant near collisions, the playful shoves, the sudden bursts of synchronized, unidentifiable dance moves. "They embrace the chaos. They shed their identities, yet somehow find unity in the anonymity." The air tasted of sugary confections, cheap wine, and a strange, exhilarating scent of liberated human sweat. A small, masked child, no older than 5, darted through the legs of towering adults, brandishing a foam sword, giggling uncontrollably. No one scolded him. No one seemed to mind the sheer, delightful mayhem. This wasn't danger of fire or ice, but the glorious, terrifying danger of unrestrained human spirit, bubbling over in a torrent of shared, unpredictable joy. Suddenly, a giant inflatable monstrosity, shaped like a grinning, multi-eyed creature, swayed through the narrow street, pushed by dozens of masked revelers. It bumped harmlessly against storefronts, its bizarre form casting shifting shadows over the crowd. Instead of fear, the humans responded with renewed enthusiasm, their cheers rising in volume, their bodies pressing in, trying to touch the strange, temporary god. A masked woman, her face a delicate porcelain doll, spun past a towering figure clad as a mythological warrior, their laughter intertwining in the dizzying air. For a fleeting moment, Unit 734 picked up a subtle shift in their biosignatures, a profound shared sense of release. They were not just watching a spectacle, they were part of the spectacle. They were performing for themselves, for each other, for the sheer defiant joy of it all. The aliens watched, utterly baffled, as the humans continued their anarchic dance. They found strength not in rigidity, but in fluidity, not in order, but in the glorious, messy, liberating chaos of shared, unpredictable humanity. They knew how to let go. And in that wild, masked abandonment, they found a deeper truth. That sometimes, to truly know who you are, you first need to pretend to be someone or something else. The riot of color and sound that was Carnival shifted, not entirely subsiding, but focusing. The sea of masked faces, a moment ago a swirling vortex of anarchic joy, now parted, forming a winding path through the throng. Down this path came a grotesque spectacle, a towering, lumbering effigy, crudely crafted from wood, cloth, and papier-mâché, depicting a bloated, sneering figure draped in mock regalia. Its name, according to human data, was King Malice. Unit 734's optics zoomed, registering the intricate details of the effigy, then panning to the crowd. Their laughter, once unrestrained, now held a sharp derisive edge. Shouts, not of adoration, but of scathing mockery, rose from thousands of throats. "Down with Malice!" "To the pyre!" they chanted, their voices a unified roar of irreverence. "Ambassador, this is a ritualized act of social subversion," Dr. Velo explained, her voice gaining a peculiar note of fascination. "They construct an embodiment of everything they despise, tyranny, injustice, even bad luck, and then collectively, publicly, destroy it. Observe the aggression. It is entirely directed at the symbol, not at individuals." A particularly boisterous human, dressed as a jester, leaped onto the effigy's base, waving a stick festooned with ribbons. He pointed a painted finger at the sneering face of King Malice, letting out a piercing, comical jeer that was immediately echoed by the crowd. Hands reached out not to touch reverently but to slap, to kick, to playfully defile the passing figure. It was a carnival of catharsis, a collective exhalation of all the year's frustrations. The procession wound its way to the town square, where a massive wooden pyre awaited, its base already smelling faintly of accelerant. The air crackled with anticipation, a mix of gleeful malice and something deeper, more primal. When King Malice was finally hoisted onto the pyre, the crowd's roar reached a crescendo. "Burn him!" a woman's voice shrieked, her masked face a picture of righteous fury. "Burn the lies!" A torch was applied. Flames eagerly licked at the base, then climbed, devouring the crude robes, turning the sneering papier-mâché face into a blistering, charring mask of agony. Smoke billowed, thick and black, carrying with it the smell of burning wood and the symbolic weight of grievances undone. The crowd cheered, a wild, almost feral sound of triumph. "They celebrate destruction once more," the ambassador intoned, his processors analyzing the pyre's heat signature, the structural integrity of the burning effigy. A cult of controlled obliteration, indeed, but as the flames consumed King Malice, as the last pieces of the grotesque figure crumbled into embers, a profound shift occurred. The raucous cheers died down, slowly, replaced by a deep, collective sigh. The mockery faded, and a quiet reverence settled over the square. Many humans bowed their heads, Others clasped hands, their eyes visible above their masks, filled not with triumph, but with a quiet, earnest hope. A soft, almost whispered chant began, a melodic hum that Unit 734 identified as a traditional prayer for blessing and renewal. They had mocked the king, banished the old, and now, in the stillness that followed the fire, they prayed for mercy for the new year. Because humans understood that destruction, sometimes, wasn't the end. It was merely the violent, necessary act of clearing the ground, of making space for something better to grow, a defiant hope rising from the ashes of what they had willingly, joyously burned away. The last, lingering boom echoed, rattling the distant probe. Unit 734's sensors registered the residual heat plume, the faint, acrid scent of sulfur, still hanging heavy in the cool night air. Below, the massive fireworks display had just concluded, bathing the human gathering in a final, ethereal glow of emerald and gold. For long moments the crowd remained, faces turned skyward, exhaling as one, a collective sigh of awe and release. Then, a new transformation. The unified silence fractured into a low hum, growing steadily louder. Humans, thousands of them, turned their attention to something entirely different. Tables laden with food, barrels of fermented beverages, and the comforting crackle of countless smaller, controlled fires. The shift was jarring, almost whiplash-inducing in its abruptness. "Ambassador, the humans are now engaging in post-display communal consumption," Dr. Velo reported, her voice tinged with a new, subtle layer of confusion. "They have transitioned from witnessing violent pyrotechnics to consuming mulled wine and roasted meats. The psychological link remains elusive." Elena peeled off her heavy, fire-retardant gloves, the rough fabric leaving a faint, familiar smell of scorched earth on her hands. Her ears still rang from the concussive force of the grand finale, and her heart still hammered with the exhilarating tension of a perfect launch sequence. But now, that tension was unraveling, replaced by a deep, weary satisfaction. She inhaled, tasting not just the sulfur but the rich, earthy scent of roasting boar and the sweet, spiced steam rising from a nearby vat of wine. A hand clapped her shoulder. "Another masterpiece, Elena!" cried a grizzled man, his face flushed, offering her a steaming mug. "Finest display in a decade!" She took a long, grateful gulp. The mulled wine was warm, sweet, and spicy, chasing away the last vestiges of cold, the last jitters of adrenaline. It flowed through her, a liquid balm. Her lips still tasted faintly of the lingering ash in the air, a stark contrast to the comforting, complex flavors on her tongue. It was a potent reminder. The danger was real, the beauty transient, but the celebration, the camaraderie, was enduring. They consume mind-altering substances as a reward for surviving self-imposed peril, the ambassador noted, the clinical observation failing to capture the vibrant scene below. Elena watched a group of children, their faces still wide-eyed with wonder, chasing each other through the smoke-scented air, sparklers held aloft like tiny, captured stars. Their laughter was pure, untainted by the complex emotions of the adults. For them, it was just magic. For her, it was a profound ritual. The explosions weren't just fire. They were a collective roar against the darkness, a defiant declaration that even in destruction there was beauty, and in its wake, the simple, profound joy of shared existence. She took another sip of wine, the warmth spreading through her chest. It wasn't about forgetting the danger, but savoring the triumph over it. Humans stared into the void, lit it up with fire, and then, with lips still tasting ash, toasted their own stubborn, beautiful survival. Because every ending, no matter how explosive, was just the beginning of another feast. The chill wind sweeping off the northern plains was sharp, but the massive bonfires crackling within the ancient city walls fought it back with defiant warmth. Smoke, thick with the scent of roasted meat and mulled wine, swirled up into the night, mingling with the low hum of thousands of human voices. Unit 734 observed the scene. A bustling, vibrant feast held not in a pristine hall, but amidst battlements scarred by ancient weapons, under archways still patched from long-ago bombardments. "Ambassador, this gathering is termed a Siege's End Festival," Dr. Velo reported, her voice tinged with a new, almost bewildered respect. "They commemorate a historical conflict, a prolonged period of encirclement and deprivation. And they are doing so by feasting. Ilara, her cheeks flushed from the firelight, and a generous serving of spiced cider, laughed, a clear, bell-like sound that cut through the deeper murmurs. She pointed to a section of the wall where a rough patch of new stone stood out against the ancient gray. "Remember old Boren trying to patch that breach with nothing but mud and prayer?" Her friend, Jax, grinned, taking a hefty bite of roasted fowl, and then tripping right as the catapult stone hit. Nearly took his beard off. Their laughter was easy, filled with a shared memory of hardship, not sorrow. Unit 734's sensors registered the joyous banter, the physical proximity, the unabashed consumption of rich foods and strong drinks. This wasn't a solemn remembrance. It was a riotous assertion of life. The very ground beneath their feet, once a battlefield, was now a dance floor. They celebrate their survival by reenacting the conditions of their suffering. Only with abundant provisions, the ambassador mused, his analysis struggling. They deliberately position themselves within the echoes of past trauma and find joy. Suddenly, a group of musicians struck up a lively stomping tune. Ilara grabbed Jax's hand, pulling him into a swirling circle of dancers. Their feet pounded the ancient stones, their bodies swayed, a vibrant defiance against the memories of cold, hunger, and fear that still clung to the very air of this place. The joy was infectious, a raw, primal declaration that they had made it. They had endured. A grizzled elder, his face lined with history, raised his tankard. To the walls that held, to the spirit that never broke. To us, thousands of voices roared in reply. To us. The sound vibrated through the city, reaching the probe in the sky, a wave of human triumph. It wasn't just a toast to a past victory. It was a reaffirmation of their inherent, stubborn will to thrive, no matter the odds, no matter the scars. They took their history, their very pain, and turned it into a reason to celebrate, louder and more vibrantly than ever before. Because for humans, the echoes of a siege weren't just a memory of fear. They were a testament to their unbreakable spirit, a permanent reminder that even in the shadow of destruction, they would always find a way to light the fires, raise a glass, and feast like there was no tomorrow.